Yes, good morning all. So in this session we will know about this HR data. So we already seen in the last class some more depth of foundation objects and MDF objects. So this HR data we already discussed in the previous class. It is divided into person objects and employment objects. So we shall see some more deep into this what are person objects and what are employment objects. So personal information, person info, that is nationality information, contact information, address information, work permit, primary emergency contact, dependents. So these are all the objects which comes under the person objects of HR data. So personal information is nothing but first name, last name of particular employee. Person info. Person info is nothing but the biographical information, birth related information of an employee, and national ID information. National ID information is nothing but, suppose we are implementing SuccessFactors in India. National ID information is nothing but Aadhaar card, PAN card details, PAN card information, Aadhaar information. For example, in US, we will be having SSN ID. So those details are captured in this national ID information. And contact information is nothing but phone contact, email contact, and social accounts that is linked in Facebook. All of this comes under this contact information. Address information is nothing but we know that is home address, permanent address, communication address, mailing address. So all this information is captured in this address information portlet. And work permit, primary emergency contact number, dependents. All this information is captured in this related to employee are captured in this work permit, primary emergency contact, dependents portlet. So these are all, this comes under the person objects. Next, if you move to this employment objects, we are having employment details, job information, job relationships, compensation information, eligibility for advances, spot bonus. So these are all the objects which comes into this employment objects section. So employment details, nothing but here we will have the details related to hire date, when was the employee hired, and various dates related to an employee, transfer date if he is transferred to particular location to location, or the probation date and the permanent employment confirmation. All these details are captured in this employment details portlet. And next, job information. In the job information, we will be having the position, what is the position of an employee, business unit of an employee, pay grade, pay group, FT. All these details related to the person are captured in this job information. And the job relationship is nothing but where exactly, in which position he is, and what are the superiors, what is the hierarchy level, to whom he is reporting, and to whom others are reporting to him. Hierarchy, and these relationships will be having related to the employee, and those relationships are captured in the job information, job relationship portlet. And the compensation information, eligibility for advances, spot bonus, all these details of a particular employee are captured in this portlet. So that is nothing but this HR data and these person objects and employment objects. So we already discussed how to configure these objects. So if we understand clearly what is what of all these objects, we can easily configure using the various configuration methods. Based on the objects we are configuring, we have to choose the configuration method and the mode. See, for example, we are configuring the foundation data. If you want to configure the foundation data, that is foundation objects, we have to configure using the corporate data model and the country specific data model. If you want to configure these objects related to the foundation object, that means we have seen here what are the foundation objects. So foundation object, location, location group, geo zone, frequency, pay grade, pay range, pay component group, dynamic role, workflow configuration, event reason. So all these 11 objects, are part of this foundation object, are called as this foundation object. So anything, whatever the thing we have to configure of related to this 11 objects, we have to configure with the help of corporate data model and the country specific corporate data model. So data models, we have already discussed what is data model, and it is an XML. Data model is nothing but it is a predefined text which is present in the form of XML code, where we have to configure these 11 objects related to foundation objects according to the customer need and the necessity and the requirement of the customer, the client, what we have discussed during the workbooks, during the initiation of the project, what we have discussed as per the customer requirement. The configuration related to these foundation objects are done with the help of this corporate data model and the country specific corporate data model. And all these 11 objects, so initially there are more than 11 objects which are migrated to MDF, that is metadata framework, MDF objects. So in this 11 objects also, in the coming near future, slowly one by one it is migrating towards this MDF objects. So these objects, so that is what we have to configure with the corporate data model and the country specific data model. And the maintenance, master data maintenance and the testing are the result, are the output which can be seen in the manage organization pay and job structure application. So whatever the configuration is done using this corporate data model and the country specific data model, the output of master data is maintained, and the output are the result which can be seen and which can be experienced using the manage organization pay and job structure application. So that is about the foundation objects configuration and the testing part. And and we have already seen this MDF objects. So configuration related to this MDF objects. So these are all these MDF objects: legal entity, business unit, division, department, cost center, pay group, pay calendar, job function, job classification. So these are all 9 objects which are part of this MDF object, that is metadata framework. The configuration related to these 9 objects, that is legal entity, business unit, division, department, cost center, pay group, pay calendar, job function, job classification. The configuration related to these 9 objects, that is 9 MDF objects, the configuration is done with the help of configure object definition, with the help of an application called configure object definition. So whatever the configuration you want to do related to these 9 objects, we can do with the help of configure object definition application. So without the data model, or without the XML, we can configure these 9 objects as per the customer requirement by using the configure object definition, and the master data maintenance and the testing which can be experienced and which can be seen, the result can be seen by the help of another application called manage data, by the application called manage data. So that is what the MDF objects configuration. And if we talk about this HR data, that is nothing but person objects and employment objects. The configuration part related to this person objects and this employment object, this configuration is done in the data models, that is succession data model. Person objects and the employment object configuration is done in the succession by using the data model, succession data model, and the country specific succession data model. So whatever the configuration with respect to the personal information, person info, national ID information, contact information, address information, work permit, primary emergency contact, dependents, employment details, job information, job relationships, compensation information, eligibility for advances, spot bonus. So whatever the configuration related to these person objects and these employment objects, we have to configure with the help of succession data model and the country specific succession data model. So with the help of these two data models, we can configure. But the thing here is that during the initial stages, we are configuring with the help of both the succession data model and the country specific succession data model. But gradually, as the days passed, the success factor has provided us an alternative to configure this object with the help of BCUI, with the help of BCUI application, that is Manage Business Configuration UI. Manage Business Configuration UI. With the help of this application, we can do the configuration related to this person objects and employment objects. And the master data maintenance and the testing are the result which can be filled by the application called the employee files. So that is how this HR data, that is person objects and employment objects, which are configured alternative to the data models by using manage business configuration, and the output are the result experience of the configuration which can be filled by the employee files, that is public and people profile. We can see this output. So that is all about this configuration of the various objects, that is foundation objects, MDF objects and the HR objects. That is all about this configuration part of this object. And as we discussed in the introduction to the Employee Central, when we are talking about the data models, we told that we are having various data models. So that is, we have already seen corporate data model, country specific data model for foundation object, and for person objects and employment objects, succession data model and the country specific succession data model. But for this alternative is there is manage business configuration BCUI, and similarly for we have other data models, that is HRIS propagation data model, event reason derivation data model, workflow rule data model. So we already discussed that in the EC we are having 7 data models. In the Employee Central we are having the 7 data models. So these 7 data models related to the configuration of foundation objects, these 2 data models, that is corporate data model and the country specific corporate data model, is used to configure foundation objects, and to configure person and employment objects, succession data model and the country specific succession data model are used. However, alternative to this data model is we are having manage business configuration. And similarly for other data models, other 3 data models which we are having in the Employee Central, that is HRIS propagation data model, event reason derivation data model, workflow rule data model. For all this data model, for all these 3 data models, we are also having SuccessFactors has provided us an alternative with the help of an application using configure business rules. So we can configure these configuration related to this data model. We can configure using configure business rules. So ideally speaking, we are using the data models only for foundation objects, corporate data model, country specific corporate data model. For all other 5 data models, we are having an alternative, and we can configure by using an alternative option provided by SuccessFactor. So that's all about these various objects present in this Employee Central. I hope you all understood in detail, in depth, and you enjoyed the session. So wish you all the best, wish you all the success. So understand very carefully and implement the objects, configure the SuccessFactor. See you all. See you in the next session.